Hello. I just wanted to clear some things up before I move forward on and specifically with combat awards, because it seems that some of the feedback I've gotten, and I've noticed this since I've been in the military. um, some people find it very important to have combat awards in order to validate combat experience. Things like combat infantryman's badge, combat action badge, even CMB's combat medics badge, and even some go so far as to say you talk about valor awards to validate that. I don't distinguish. I don't think. I know there are a lot of people wearing those badges that shouldn't be wearing them. I also know there's a lot of people that should be wearing those badges that are not. And I'm going to give you an anecdotal experience of mine to illustrate this point. On my last Iraq deployment, which was in 2011, I was a platoon leader, and we were about halfway through our deployment, and we had done two separate missions up to this point. The first mission was Advise Train Assist with the Iraqi Army of the 36th to 46th IA Brigade. So I was a second lieutenant. I had to wear captain's rank at the time, just so my Iraqi Army peer, who was a brigadier general, would even talk to me. That ruffled quite a lot of feathers, as you can imagine. But anyways, we had to travel over an hour just to get to our AO. And that was a tough mission because it was a dangerous area. Anybody who's been in northern Iraq knows the name of the town Hawija, and that was mine. I was in charge of that town, along with Riyadh and all the other cities that were around there. And I wasn't just in charge of advice training, assisting an entire Iraqi Army brigade. I also had responsibility of the IP stations and the emergency service units down there. Tough area, tough time. And then we went from there, we transitioned from that to hunter-killer missions on Route Clemson, Route Cherry, other routes, Route Danny, like routes that had a lot of IED activity. We were trying to lure out IED emplacers and trigger guys so we could ambush them and essentially kill them. And then we transitioned from that to doing patrols, counter rocket, counter indirect fire, presence patrol, those types of missions in conjunction with the emergency service unit in the city of Kirkuk. Now, the nature of the fight in Kirkuk was different than the nature of the fight from my previous deployments in places like Baghdad and Ramadi, particularly Ramadi. Ramadi was when I was there, was a pretty active area, and you could expect to get into any number of types of engagements that you would expect, to include IEDs. Of course, there wasn't a place in Iraq where you could get away from IEDs, really. Indirect fire, direct fire, so troops in contact type scenario was very common in Ramadi when I was there. I spent almost 2 years in Ramadi, early in the war, 03, 04, 05. So take that for what it's worth. Anybody that's been there knows what I'm talking about. Now, Kirkuk was different. Not a lot of ticks, troops in contact. However, tons of IEDs, tons of snipers, but they really, really, really liked RKG-3s, which are anti-tank grenades. And that was so we had to have different protective postures for that. Anyways, moving forward, we were doing the mission inside the city. We had just pulled out the gate. The first thing that we always had to do was link up with the emergency service unit, which is basically supposed to be the elite of the Iraqi police. So we'd go there. The status of forces agreement at that point required us to have an escort if we were doing patrols. So we'd go pick up our escort, and then we would go out and we would patrol the named areas of interest that we were scheduled to patrol during that patrol. And however, we didn't get that far this day. On this day, we went. We had made the first turn out of gate. I think it was gate 2, out of Cost Warrior. Some of you that may have been up in Kirkuk may have known it as Fob Warrior, but by that time they'd called it Contingency Operating Station Warrior. I don't remember. We pull out. We turn south to on route Chevy, and we had to take Chevy down to the police headquarters. But as soon as we turned south, my rear gunner, I think it was Salyers, Specialist Salyers, good soldier, really good. He's probably a sergeant first class by now, but he goes, "Sir, I see a large explosion to our rear, to our 6 o'clock." And he named out like how far it was. He couldn't quite tell. He knew it was about a kilometer away. So we turn around and we basically head in that direction. I'm talking to Hire. I'm letting him know what's going on. Saying, hey, something's going on. We need to go see what's going on. We go up there. We pull up on the street. There's this big traffic circle that's right in the middle of Kirkuk. And there's a lot of government facilities that are around there. So it's hardened. There's T-walls that they've put in there basically to protect against the very thing that we were responding to, which was what turned out to be a car bomb. So we pull up on the street, though, and there's a T-wall that's blocking the street in order for us to be able to get into the traffic circle, which is where all the carnage is, where all the, where we need to help. We get there. We got there probably just minutes after this thing had blown up. And it's interesting, on our side of the T-wall, it's like any other day. It almost looks like, a suburban area in Albuquerque in this area. The houses are fairly nice. Some attempts were made at making a lawn on some of these houses, strangely. There is a marketplace that's not far away, but it's a fairly decently upscale area. I tell my platoon sergeant, lock it down right here. Nobody in, nobody out. That's the drill. Just lock it down. You don't know what's coming. I take myself, my interpreter, and 2 of my dismounts, my RTO, and 1 other dismount, and we walk onto the other side of the T-wall. And the very first thing that I see is it's just chaos. There's just stuff blowing everywhere. There's telephone poles that are down. There's with active wires, lighting up and sparking. There's vehicles that are just demolished. There's even a couple of T-walls that literally had been toppled over from the force of the blast, which is a pretty big blast if you know anything about explosives and how strong they have to be to knock over a damn T-wall. The first thing I see is there's a building we walk by, we serpentine in through these T-walls to get onto the other side, and there was a giant semi-trailer that was parked, and to my right is some type of government facility. I didn't know what it was at the time. And then a couple meters to my front right is this giant crater. And then on the other side of the street is a emergency service unit truck that had been blown into this building. This building was on fire. And the very first thing I see is on fire people on a second or third floor, throwing children out of a window to the people below that are also and the children are also on fire. I don't know exactly what was happening there. I assume it was a home. I assume they were trapped upstairs, and I assume those parents were trying to save their children. but they were all on fire. So I watched that for that happens over the course of about 5 seconds. I immediately basically moved from there. I looked to find the highest ranking Iraqi on the ground, and I just go up to him. I go, "What do you need from me?" I said, "I got an entire platoon of U.S. soldiers here. What do you need from me?" And he just reiterates the plan that I've already put in place, which is where I was at. Lock it down. Nobody in, nobody out. Doesn't matter who they are. Nobody in, nobody out. And the reason why this is um, people are going to start converging where this explosion happened, as particularly security forces and emergency units. And we don't know if there's another car bomb planned. We don't know any of this. So I go back to my platoon. We cordon off the area. We're pulling security there, and there's a growing group of Iraqis outside of our cordon. And the way that the street was is um, there was a street and there was houses all along the streets, but in Iraq, most of the houses are blocked off by big walls, strong walls, and they line the entire length of the street on both sides. So really, it's almost like a fortress, and we're in this area where, um, it's fairly easy to monitor everybody that's going to come in and off that street because they can't go through people's yards or anything like that. They have to go all the way to the other side of the block, around to do that. So we're doing that. People are concerned. The family members are concerned about, they came home and heard or saw the explosion. They want to know the status of their family. And so we're basically telling them, sorry, no, we have to be bad. We have to be mean almost for their own safety. Because, I can empathize with them at that moment. And who knows if there's a guy wearing an S vest or a suicide vest in there. So yeah, it's crushing. It hurts. It sucks that we have to go no. And thank God we got our sunglasses on, so that they don't have to see us basically understanding the plight that they're in. But our job here is to protect them, and the best thing we can do for them is keep them where they're at and not let them come in. And it just wouldn't help the situation no matter what. First off, they don't need to see that right now. We need to get control of what the hell's going on the ground. Well, within our cordon, there was a kid that was inside one of the houses, and I happened to be walking by. And remember I told you on my last video when I was talking about combat, but you never 100%. Well, I had colitis really bad. I didn't know I had colitis. I ended up getting hospitalized that night for 3 days to be rehydrated because I had colitis so bad. So I'm literally walking and puking about every 30 minutes, maybe more, maybe less. My cramps really bad on my stomach. My body had basically dehydrated over time, even though I was drinking water and doing everything. It's just so freaking hot. I had actually been laid up in bed for 24 hours before that. This is the first mission I did after being laid up in bed because my commander forced me to lay in bed because I look so terrible. So I'm on this mission where I'm walking. I'm actually going back to the other side of the T-wall to see what the status of the situation is over there, and I see a kid walking towards me, and he basically says, "Hey, we got some body parts in my backyard," and I go, "Show me." Now, why is that important? Well, one, for identification purposes. Two, as grisly as it is, we have to do forensics on all this stuff. So we have to preserve as much of it as possible. You can get signatures of IED makers based off of the components that they use to make the IEDs or the car bombs. You can get DNA samples, so if people have been arrested before already and been released, we could figure out who they are. If we figure out who they are, we can figure out what organization is responsible. There's a lot of things that we got to do. In his backyard, he said, I got body parts in my backyard. And I just go, all right, I go, okay, show me. So myself, my terp, my dismounts that come with me, and I go as I'm walking through the gate, and on the right hand side is like a little small porch like area, like adobe porch like area, and what I assume is his mother and several of his siblings are huddled, um, and they're basically the mom's holding on to like three kids together, um, preparing for whatever it is that they need to prepare for. Um, the kid takes me to his backyard. I tell him to stop. I pull him back, and then I can see before me what are in fact human remains. And they weren't. It wasn't anything recognizable. It wasn't like uh, a leg or an arm or anything like that. They were chunks of skin and organs. And this kid was particularly concerned about it because one of the chunks of skin had landed on his shoe. Um, so I didn't touch it because I didn't have any gloves. I didn't have like rubber gloves or anything like that. But I need to go let the investigating officer on the scene know that we got some stuff over on this side of those T-walls. So I tell the kid, hey, be strong for your family. I need you to go over there and stay right there and don't move. But be strong, because he was clearly like the oldest brother there. And I was like, you're the man right now. You need to be the man, and take care of your mom, take care of your siblings. And then I said, but don't go over there, don't touch it. I will be back with somebody to get this later. So then I go back to the other side of the T-walls, and what ended up happening was, with the incident, was that was a payday for the Iraqi military. And the Iraqi military and the Iraqi police, they pay their soldiers in cash. So what happens is their officers all gather at the National Bank in town, and the officers collect that money, and then they take it back to their units and they disperse it to their soldiers with a pay record. And on that day, the insurgents or the violent extremist networks, as we call them, they knew that was going to happen. And that trailer that I had walked by earlier was a giant semi truck full of Iraqi cash. And that building that was to my right that looked like a government building, well, it was a government building. It was the Iraqi National Bank. So it was pretty clear that the intent of the insurgents was to knock out two birds with one stone. One, kill a bunch of Iraqi officers, police, army, and ESU, and blow up the trailer that had millions and millions, hundreds of millions of dollars in Iraqi dinars in it. So I find, and the investigating officer's not on the scene yet, so I go up to this full-bird colonel that's on the scene. I said, hey, we got some body parts on this side. And, we're holding the line over here on this side of the T-wall. Is there anything else that you need from us? He goes, no, hold fast. I'll try and get somebody over there to, he basically says, inshallah, on getting somebody over there to get the body parts, which in Iraq means, yeah, probably not going to happen. Like, I hope it happens, but there's no guarantee it's going to happen. Actually, it's probably not going to happen. So, note to anybody dealing with people in the Middle East, if they say inshallah on an agreement, that doesn't mean you've got an agreement, okay? Just, there's some cultural awareness that you need to have right there. Go back on the other side. There was actually a pile of trash that was next to this trailer. There happened to be a plastic bag on the ground, like a grocery bag. So I picked it up off the ground. I inverted over my hands. I went over back to where the body parts were. Picked them up, closed it up, tied it off, walked back to that same guy, said, hey, here's your stuff. You're probably going to need this for forensics, right? Like, you're going to need this for forensics, right? To kind of reinforce the point that, hey, like, please, like, you get an appreciation in the United States that we actually have rule of law and we have a system and we investigate crimes and things like that, because that doesn't really, it doesn't happen very well over there. Anyways, so all this carnage is going on. There's still smoke. There's still stuff on fire. There's wounded. To the credit of the emergency service unit, two Iraqi police or emergency service unit police were pulling guard at that transaction, and the car bomb had pulled up, and they were trying to get through. The ESU refused to let them through, and they detonated. And they probably saved way more lives by doing this, but they gave up their own lives in the course of doing it. It was actually the truck that I saw that was blown into the building that was across the street when I first walked on the scene. That was their truck. So, why did I tell this story about a car bomb? That doesn't count as a combat action. So, that I count it as the aftermath of combat, which in a lot of respects is just as bad as combat, because you got to pick up the mess. Yeah, there was spackleting on these walls. When somebody gets blown up by that much explosives, there's just not much left. But you can tell the smell because it's mixed with the whatever explosive they use. They happen to be used homemade explosive, which has a specific smell. Mixed with diesel or fuel being burned from the vehicles that caught on fire and everything that's leaking onto the ground. And there's a very pungent odor mixed in it with this of flesh. And you may not know what I'm talking about, but for people who have been in that situation, they know exactly what I'm talking about. You can cut it with a knife in the air, that smell. And if you look close enough, you literally see nerve endings and tendons and things like that blown, sticking onto things. So that's that's a rough day for anybody. I don't care how much combat you've seen. That's a rough day. I wouldn't want my day to go that way, regardless of how hardcore I thought I was. Even if it didn't actually happen to me. I wouldn't want to have to go clean up a mess like that, because it's terrible. Now, up to that point, almost everybody in my platoon that had not already had a cab from a previous deployment, they had already earned a cab based off of combat actions we had had prior to that. But one of them had not yet, and I tried to get it through the chain of he was on leave when we, like, over the course of when you go on leave on mid-tour, it's not 2 weeks, it's actually like a month that you're gone, because it takes you like almost a week to get home. It can take you almost a week to get back. So, and he was one of my gunners, and I was trying to get him his cab because he was there and he saw all the same things I saw. And gunners have it worse because not only are they exposed more to snipers, and if IEDs go off in their vehicle, they take the most blunt of it because they have the least amount of protection. But they also have the other duty of being responsible for an entire flank's worth of security for the entire platoon. That's a lot of responsibility. So I was trying to hook them up and be like, look, man, to me, you've earned it. And it was denied. So, do I consider that guy a combat veteran? I do. Because I know what he's went through. Does the government consider him a combat veteran? No. Because maybe my phraseology wasn't good when I was getting sworn statements to back it up. I've had instances where the enemy actually threw RKG-3 grenades at us, and I couldn't get... sorry, Sergeant Hardwick, I tried to get you a cab for that. Because they were aiming at his vehicle, but they didn't detonate. And because they didn't detonate, they said, oh, it doesn't count. Even though in the seconds before you saw the fucking thrower throw that shit. You didn't know that, and we still responded to it just like we would any other combat action. But because it didn't blow up, he didn't get his combat action badge. And you know, among many other things, like there's lots of guys that are like just right there, and they go out on every patrol, and they're sucking just as bad as you are. But you know, so you know, some people believe you have to actually fire the rifle in order to be in combat. Well, Lewis Nixon of Band of Brothers fame never fired a shot in World War II. Does he deserve a CIB? So, for people on the outside, if I would say this when dealing with people that have been in these types of situations or claim to have been in these types of situations. If you're curious about their service and the first thing they show you is a bunch of awards, for me, that's a big red flag that they're probably full of shit. However, if they're talking to you and they go, yeah, I've been through some stuff. Like, yeah, I saw. I don't know how to describe it. I've gotten better at articulating it over time, but a lot of people haven't figured out how to do that. And I want people to understand, and maybe kind of a shot at some of those veterans that are like, bruh, you know, I got all this fucking fruit salad on my chest. I'm a badass. If you're still measuring your dick, maybe you missed the point. Anyways, that's my 2 cents. If you think I'm wrong, by all means, post it in the comments. I don't have any problem with it. If you think I'm right, or if you have anything to add, by all means, just let me know in the comments. Please click and subscribe. And shout out to my former division, 3rd Infantry Division, Dogface Soldiers, Rock of the Marne, Top of the Rock, BattleLineWarrior.com. I will put a link in the description if you're interested. First unit, Invasion. Good unit. Lots of time in the field. I hate NTC. Have a good day. Take care.